What's up everybody, welcome back. So a little follow-up video after the fire event to set up projectile bullet penetration. The other video got quite long, so well over an hour, and I kind of forgot about it. So we're just gonna add it right now. So first thing, let's make sure we actually fire a projectile. So let's go into the weapon table and I'm gonna set up my pistol to projectile and make sure we fire the bullet projectile. And now we need to set up the collision. So let's go to our project settings and make sure everything is set up correctly. So go to collision and to the presets. There is a projectile channel by default in the first person project. So if it's not there, you can create a new object channel. You can call it projectile and set the default response to block. There's a projectile preset over here, so we're going to open it up, and you want to make sure that you ignore other projectiles and you want to set the pawn to overlap, and you can leave pretty much everything else to block. That's fine. Now for the pawn, we're going to open it up as well, and we're going to set the projectile to ignore and accept this. And the last thing you need to do is go to the character mesh and set the projectile to overlap and accept it, and that should be good to go. Now let me see, let's go to our actual projectile over here, and we want to make sure that the capsule is set to the projectile preset. So presets over here and set it to projectile. And for the enemy that you are using, you also want to make sure that the collision is correct. So for the capsule, you want to have it set to pawn, and then for the mesh you want it character mesh, and you also want to make sure that you generate overlap events. So tick this little box over here, compile and save, and I think this should pretty much work. So if we go to our projectile, select the capsule, and we want to get the component begin overlap event, and let's check if it's actually an enemy that we're hitting. So we're casting to our zombie, and then I'm gonna call the take damage event, and that just deletes the zombie, so we can see we actually hit something. And let's see if this is working. So let me get a viewport here. So I've set up this row of zombies, and I'm actually firing a projectile, and as you can see, it's going right through them, and every one of them is being deleted. So my aim is a little bit off, so I didn't actually hit the last one in the first attempt, but it actually works. So there is a little side note to this. If I have blueprints open in the background, then it will not respond as quickly as it should, and you probably miss a few enemies here and there. So as you can see, it definitely hit the enemy, but it went right through him, and it doesn't always do it, but the main reason for it is if you have blueprints open in the background, it seems to fail sometimes. So I've actually built this project in a packaged project, and I've tried it, and in there it just responds as it should. So it doesn't fail, it doesn't go through the enemies, it just always hits them. So that's definitely something to do with the performance if you have windows open in the background. So this is the build project, and this actually works as well. So as you can see, all of the zombies are being deleted. So the penetration is working, and now we can set it up. So we can hook it up to our data table, for example. So if I go to my projectile, I can add a few variables in here. So something like maximum penetration, and that's an integer, and then also create a normal penetration or penetration count, dat kan ook. well, that was a little bit of Dutch in there. I didn't know why that came out, but okay, let's continue. So right now we can add an array over here. So if I promote my enemy to a variable and call this hit enemies and make this an array, yeah, change it, that's fine. Get rid of this. So then I want to drag in the array and add a unique enemy. Let's get rid of this. So if the enemy is already in the array, it will not get added and it will return a -1. So I'm going to check if I hit a unique enemy or not. So if this is not -1, and hook it up over here. And if that's true, then I'm gonna delete the zombie and I'm gonna increase my penetration. And then I'm simply gonna check if I'm at maximum penetration or not. And if I am, I'm gonna delete myself. So destroy actor. There we go. So now we can set the maximum penetration over here to something like 2. And that should only delete 2 zombies if we fire. So let's see if that's working. And as you can see, only the first 2 zombies are being deleted. And I shot actually right beneath his shoulder, so that's why he didn't get deleted. But this is actually working. So because we're tracing to the character mesh, you're actually tracing against the physics asset. So you might think you hit him while you're actually missing him sometimes. So if you want to trace against the capsule component, then you'll get more consistent results. But obviously the traces will hit more often as well while you're not actually hitting the mesh. So that's kind of a trade-off that you need to decide. I also discovered that if you just increase the capsule half height for the projectile to make it longer, then it will register better as well. So if you make it something like 15 units or something and just make sure that it's rotated correctly, then the collision will be detected a lot better. And you could also play around in the projectile movement. There are some settings like the substepping and the simulation time, but those are performance heavy as well. So those are probably the last options you want to look at if you're having issues. The faster your projectile flies, the more often you will have collision issues. So keep that in mind using overlapping projectiles. So we could make this our parent projectile, and we could simply create child classes, for example. And now all of these child classes will by default have the variables that we use in the parent. So we can simply set our maximum penetration in the child as well. So we could use a setup like this to create some default behavior in a parent projectile. And then if we spawn the projectile when we are shooting, so if we go to our character. So there's one more thing I want to mention when working with parent and child blueprints. So all of the behavior that's in a parent blueprint will automatically be included in the child blueprint as well. So if I have this behavior for the component begin overlap, then that will also work for the child blueprint by default. Without adding any of the code. So if I go into my weapon info table and I will assign the child blueprint, then everything will still work fine. Just like you expect, one zombie will get deleted. But if I would create an event in here, so I create a custom event and call this something like a projectile hit. And this will have an actor input. let's just assign actor, and I'm gonna call this event right here. So projectile hit, and assign the other actor. Oh. So this is not updated. Oh, come on. There we go. And I would plug this in right here. So now this is the parent blueprint. And everything still works as you would expect. So if I would go in and I would fire, one zombie will get deleted. But if I would go into my child blueprint right now and I will add the hit actor event in here, projectile hit, sorry, then this will override the behavior that's in the, that was the wrong one, projectile hit, and you want to get the event, then this will override the behavior in the parent blueprint. So if I will simply print a string on screen and play this right now, then none of the zombies will be deleted and it will pass through every one of them and it will simply print. So you can add custom behavior by simply adding the events in the child blueprint to override them. Do keep in mind that if you leave one of these nodes empty in here, then it will still override and nothing will happen. So make sure that you delete the entire event if you want to get rid of it. So that's how you can work with parent and child blueprints as well. Let me see, we have the fire projectile over here. So if we make sure that we spawn one of the child classes over here, then we can simply cast to our parent projectile. And this cast will always return true if we are using one of the child blueprints. And then we can make sure that we set the maximum penetration, for example, over here. And we can set it to the value that we actually get from the data table that we created in the previous video. So we can use the bullet penetration that's assigned in the weapon. So that's how you could link it up to your data table, for example. And now this shouldn't have any penetration because it's set to 0 in the data table, and that's messed up. Nice. Let me see. The penetration. So that's probably not working because of the boolean in here. So let's go to the projectile. So we need to make sure this is correct. So if the penetration count is greater than or equal to the maximum penetration, then we want to stop. So now this should work. And now there's no penetration because the value is set to 0. So yeah, that's bullet penetration with projectiles in a nutshell. So thanks for watching, everybody. Talk to you later.